They called it the Frozen Tomb, a collapsed mine shaft locked beneath centuries of ice, where the ground was harder than stone and men disappeared without a trace. For decades, it stood untouched, a warning carved into the Klondike that some gold was never meant to be found. But what happens when fear meets technology? Then Parker Schnabel arrived with lasers and modern tools the old-timers never imagined. And in just 72 hours, he pulled more gold from that frozen nightmare than most miners see in a lifetime. Was it luck? Or something far bigger? Because buried deeper, where no one had dared to look for over 100 years, was a secret worth $75 million. A discovery so massive, it would rewrite everything they thought they knew about gold mining, and nearly destroy the man who uncovered it. The death trap with a golden secret. In the brutal world of Klondike gold mining, there are places that make even the toughest crews hesitate. These locations have names that get whispered around campfires late at night, always attached to stories of broken machinery, financial devastation, and accidents that ended careers, or worse. The Widow's Cut was the most infamous of them all. It was not just another difficult dig. It was a collapsed mine shaft so dangerous, so notoriously unforgiving, that attempting to work it was considered a death wish dressed up as a business plan. The old-timers did not avoid this place out of superstition. They avoided it because they understood exactly what they were dealing with. The geology of the Widow's Cut was a masterclass in everything that can go wrong underground. The entire region sat buried beneath deep permafrost, ground that had been frozen solid for thousands of years. This was not ordinary frozen dirt that might soften with a little heat. This was earth compressed into something harder than concrete, locked in place since before humans ever walked the Klondike. Digging into permafrost is like trying to carve through solid rock, except rock does not melt. Permafrost does. And when it melts, it does not soften gradually. It collapses. Multi-ton chunks of frozen earth and rock can break loose without any warning, crushing anything or anyone unfortunate enough to be underneath. But the permafrost was only half the nightmare. Hidden beneath the frozen ground, invisible until it was too late, were underground springs and pockets of trapped meltwater. A single miscalculation, one dig too deep in the wrong spot, could turn the entire shaft into a watery grave in seconds. Millions of dollars in heavy equipment could be wiped out before anyone had time to react. The Widow's Cut was not just difficult. It was designed by nature to punish anyone arrogant enough to try. One wrong move could end your season. One moment of bad luck could end your life. Every experienced miner in the Yukon knew this, which is exactly why they stayed away. Every experienced miner, except one, the gambler Parker. Schnabel did not look at the Widow's Cut the way other miners did. Where they saw guaranteed failure, he saw the biggest opportunity of his career. This was not recklessness speaking. This was not the arrogance of youth mistaking itself for invincibility. This was pattern recognition, honed over years of watching the gold fields separate the cautious from the successful. Parker had been studying gold mining since before he could drive, learning at the feet of his legendary grandfather, John Schnabel, one of the most successful and respected prospectors the Klondike had ever produced. From his grandfather, Parker absorbed something that most miners never truly internalized, a lesson that seemed counterintuitive until you understood the economics of gold. The richest deposits are almost always found in the places everyone else is too scared to dig. Even as a teenager, Parker had shown an appetite for risk that made veteran miners nervous. While his rivals like Tony Beats built their operations on decades of old-school experience, methodically working proven ground with time-tested methods, Parker combined that traditional grit with a relentless, almost reckless ambition. He pushed for bigger goals. He claimed more land. He chased more gold than anyone thought possible or advisable. Some called him cocky. Others called him lucky. But year after year, his results spoke louder than any criticism. The season Parker turned his attention to the Widow's Cut, he was chasing something specific: a 7,000-ounce goal. If he could hit that number, it would cement his status as the undisputed king of the Klondike, the most successful young miner in the history of the goldfields. It was an audacious target, the kind of number that made experienced operators shake their heads. But Parker had built his entire career on proving doubters wrong. When he looked at the Widow's Cut, he did not see a warning sign. He saw an invitation. If nobody else had the courage to tackle this ground, then whatever gold was buried down there was his for the taking. The question was not whether the reward was worth the risk. The question was whether he had the tools to beat the odds. Eyes in the sky. Parker knew that brute force would not conquer the Widow's Cut. Throwing more dozers and excavators at permafrost was the approach that had failed everyone else. He needed something different, something the old-timers could never have imagined. So he brought in technology that was revolutionizing the mining industry, a weapon that worked at the speed of light: LiDAR. The system Parker deployed stood for light detection and ranging, and what it could do seemed almost impossible. By firing millions of laser pulses at the ground from drones flying overhead, LiDAR could create an incredibly precise, three-dimensional map of terrain that would be invisible to the naked eye. The technology worked like this. Each laser pulse shot down from the drone, hit the ground, and bounced back. By measuring exactly how long each pulse took to return, the system could calculate the precise elevation of every point it touched. Do this millions of times across a landscape, and you end up with a digital model so accurate it can reveal features hidden under dense vegetation, collapsed structures, and decades of accumulated debris. Parker's team flew their drones over every inch of the Widow's Cut, building a picture of the terrain that no human eye had ever seen. The combination of laser mapping and aerial surveying gave Parker's operation a superpower. While other crews were essentially guessing, drilling blind holes into ground they could not see, hoping to get lucky, Parker's team was constructing a perfect digital model of the entire claim. They could examine the contours of the Earth from every angle, looking for weaknesses in the permafrost, searching for any sign of the original mining operation that had been abandoned over a century ago. They were hunting for a secret entrance, a hidden path into the treasure that everyone else had given up on. And then, buried in the data, they found something that changed everything. The forgotten shaft. Hidden under more than a century of tangled wilderness, collapsed debris, and frozen earth, the LiDAR revealed something stunning. A perfectly straight, man-made anomaly cutting through the chaos. It was a vertical shaft, completely invisible to anyone standing on the surface, but unmistakable in the laser data. The original miners had dug this entrance over 100 years ago, before they abandoned the site and let nature swallow their work. For decades, it had sat there forgotten, buried under layers of permafrost and overgrowth, waiting for someone with the right technology to find it again. The precise measurements from the LiDAR showed the shaft extended more than 40 meters straight down into the darkness. That was over 130 feet of vertical drop, a direct pathway into the heart of the mine. This discovery transformed everything. Instead of trying to dig an entirely new approach through the deadly permafrost, a process that would have cost millions and taken months, Parker's team could use this existing shaft. They had found their secret entrance. The only problem was that the shaft had been collapsing for a century. What followed was some of the most nerve-wracking work the crew had ever attempted. They hauled in massive reinforced steel beams, hundreds of tons of structural support, and began the slow process of stabilizing the crumbling walls. Every movement had to be calculated. Every excavator scrape echoed in dangerous silence, the crew always listening for the crack of shifting earth that would signal disaster. The permafrost pressed in from all sides, unpredictable and patient, waiting for any mistake. But Parker had assembled the best crew in the Klondike, and inch by inch, they built a safe pathway down into the frozen darkness. After weeks of frustration and fear, they finally had a direct line to whatever was waiting at the bottom. What they found exceeded their wildest expectations. The mother lode. The moment Parker's crew reached the bottom of the stabilized shaft, their flashlight beams caught something that made everyone stop breathing. Glittering in the darkness, untouched by human hands for over a century, was a quartz vein rich with visible gold. Not traces that required a trained eye to identify, not faint hints that might or might not pay out after processing. This was actual gold, gleaming in the rock face like someone had deliberately painted it there to announce that the treasure was real. The on-site geologist, a veteran who had spent his entire career examining gold deposits across multiple continents and every type of geological formation, stood in stunned silence for nearly a minute. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. He said it was the cleanest, most pristine, and richest natural deposit he had ever encountered in 30 years of professional work. The original miners had been digging in exactly the right place all along. They simply ran out of technology before they could reach the prize waiting below. There was no time for celebration. In the goldfields, news travels faster than trust. Parker knew that whispers of a major discovery could attract claim jumpers, legal challenges, and unwanted attention from every direction. The crew went to work with a frantic, desperate energy that only comes when you know you are racing against time. They operated around the clock in shifts, fueled by adrenaline, and the sight of more gold than most of them had seen in their lives combined. Sleep became optional. Food became an afterthought. The only thing that mattered was getting the gold out of the ground before something went wrong. In just 72 hours, 3 days of non-stop, back-breaking labor, they managed to extract more than 4,000 ounces of gold. When they ran the numbers, the haul was worth over $10 million. $10 million from a place everyone said was impossible to mine. It was a season-saving fortune that covered fuel costs, equipment repairs, crew wages, and operating expenses in one incredible weekend. The gamble had paid off in spectacular fashion. But Parker's geologist had even more shocking news. The gold they had pulled was just a taste. The vein did not stop at their little chamber. It extended much, much further into the earth. The $75 million secret. After examining the geology of the quartz vein and cross-referencing it with the LIDAR data, Parker's geologist delivered findings that seemed almost impossible to believe. The gold-bearing formation they had tapped was far larger than anyone had imagined. It did not just extend a few more meters into the rock. Based on the vein's thickness and the projected geological patterns, the deposit stretched for another 2 kilometers underground. That was more than a mile of gold-rich quartz, sitting in the darkness, waiting to be claimed. The math that followed made everyone's head spin. Taking into account the incredible richness of the gold they had already extracted, projecting that concentration across the full 2-kilometer vein, the potential value was staggering. Another $75 million in gold, sitting right beneath Parker's feet. If they could pull it off, this would not just be a successful season. This would be the single most successful operation in the history of Gold Rush, the biggest score the Klondike had seen in modern times. It was the kind of discovery that miners spend their entire lives dreaming about. The strike that turns struggling operations into empires and unknown prospectors into legends. But Parker understood something that the celebrations threatened to obscure. Finding this treasure was only the beginning of a much longer and more complicated story. Word of a $75 million discovery simply could not stay secret in the Klondike. The goldfields were too small, too interconnected, too fueled by gossip and jealousy for something this massive to remain hidden. Soon, everyone would know. Rival miners who had watched Parker's rise with barely concealed resentment would be sharpening their attacks. Government inspectors who had been content to process routine paperwork would suddenly find reasons to scrutinize every permit and environmental compliance issue. Lawyers representing interests Parker had never heard of would materialize with claims and challenges designed to drag him into courtrooms where gold mining experience counted for nothing. International speculators and investment groups who saw the goldfields as an opportunity for hostile acquisition would start circling with checkbooks and legal teams. Parker had proven he could find gold that others could not reach. Now, he would have to prove something far more difficult. He would have to protect his discovery from every predator the fortune would attract. The kingdom under siege. The attacks began before the assay reports were even filed. It started as whispers in the saloons of Dawson City, the kind of gossip that spreads when someone suddenly has more success than their neighbors can tolerate. But the whispers quickly evolved into something more sinister. Viral posts appeared on social media claiming that Parker had been sentenced to life in prison for environmental crimes. The accusations were completely fabricated, a piece of digital fiction almost certainly created by rivals with too much time and too little success. But in the hyper-competitive world of gold mining, a lie can do more damage than a flooded shaft. The rumor forced Parker to spend precious time and money on lawyers and public relations, fighting a battle on terrain he had never trained for. He was a miner, not a media strategist. He knew how to move earth and read geology. He did not know how to counter coordinated disinformation campaigns. While he was dealing with the social media attacks, something even more dangerous emerged. A shell corporation with ties to a shadowy international consortium filed a lawsuit challenging the legality of his claim on the widow's cut. They produced a series of forged documents, supposedly century-old paperwork that gave them legitimate rights to the land. Parker, who had always settled disputes with handshakes or shouting matches, now found himself entangled in legal maneuvering designed to bleed him dry before he could extract another ounce. His rivals smelled weakness. Tony Beets, in particular, seemed to relish Parker's predicament, offering condescending public advice while quietly fanning the flames behind the scenes. The gold mining community, which Parker had dominated through skill and determination, was now circling like wolves. Land prices in the region were skyrocketing as speculators bet on the area's potential. New miners flooded in, hoping to stake claims near Parker's discovery. Government officials increased their scrutiny of every permit and environmental compliance issue. The young king of the Klondike was learning that a crown painted in gold makes you a target from every direction. Cracks in the foundation. The pressure did not stay outside the mine. It seeped into everything, corroding the bonds that had held Parker's crew together through the hardest seasons. What should have been a time of celebration became a boiling cauldron of resentment and suspicion. The easy friendships forged over years of shared hardship evaporated as people started calculating their share of $75 million. Arguments erupted over who deserved the biggest bonus. Workers demanded shorter hours or safer conditions, suddenly aware that they were risking their lives for a fortune that would mostly belong to someone else. The stress turned reliable crew members into ticking time bombs. Outside the mine, the situation deteriorated even faster. Several crew members, unaccustomed to sudden wealth and the attention it brings, started spending their advance bonuses in ways that made headlines. Expensive cars crashed on icy roads. Fights broke out in local bars. The tabloid press, always hungry for stories about gold rush excess, circled like vultures. Parker had spent his entire adult life building a reputation for professionalism and results. Now he was watching his team become gossip column fodder, undermining everything he had worked to create. Parker had always led from the front, running machines alongside his crew, sharing the physical labor and the daily risks. But now he found himself spending more time managing crises than mining gold. Every day brought new fires to extinguish, new conflicts to mediate, new threats to assess. His once loyal crew was fracturing into factions, each person focused on their own paycheck and their own grievances. The discovery that was supposed to cement his legacy was threatening to tear apart the operation he had spent years building. The gold was still in the ground, but the team he needed to extract it was falling apart. The weight of the crown. The most dangerous threat was not lurking in the courtrooms or the tabloids. It was growing inside Parker's own mind. Months of relentless pressure had accumulated into something he had never experienced before. The legal challenges from mysterious corporations, the constant rumors and attacks on social media, the betrayals from people he had trusted, the weight of managing a potential $75 million operation while everyone from rivals to regulators watched his every move. All of it pressed down on him until every decision felt like a potential disaster. Every comment from a crew member sounded like an insult. Every shadow looked like a trap waiting to spring. Parker had always been confident, sometimes to the point of arrogance. That confidence was his edge, the quality that allowed him to attempt things other miners dismissed as impossible. But confidence needs fuel. It needs small victories and forward progress. When the ground beneath your feet keeps shifting, when every direction seems to lead to another problem, confidence starts to crack. Parker began second-guessing decisions he would have made instantly a year earlier. He found himself paralyzed by choices that should have been simple. The man who had seen opportunity where others saw only danger now saw threats everywhere he looked. The gold from the widow's cut had made Parker a legend. People across the world were calling him a genius, a modern-day prospector who struck it rich through sheer determination and technological innovation. But Parker was not celebrating. He felt like a king under siege, defending his castle from attacks that came from every direction simultaneously. The dream that had driven him since childhood, the vision of building something that would honor his grandfather's legacy and prove his own place in Klondike history, now felt less like a dream and more like a prison. Every morning brought new battles. Every night brought questions without answers. And deep down, in moments he would never admit to anyone, Parker was beginning to wonder if the treasure was worth the toll it was taking. Parker Schnabel didn't just find gold. He crossed a line few ever dare to approach. In the Klondike, success has a way of attracting forces as dangerous as the ground itself. And the deeper the fortune, the heavier the crown becomes. History has shown that the moment a miner wins big is often the moment the real fight begins. The gold is still there. The pressure is building. And the choices Parker makes from here will decide whether this becomes a story of legacy or a cautionary tale whispered long after the machines fall silent. So the question remains, When the ground is no longer the greatest threat, can a man survive what comes next?